All right. Hey, everybody. Mancave Sports coming back at you again. Cool Thursday night edition of the Man Cave here. I'm Bear Lyathan. On with me right now is Derek Kramer. Now, Derek is coming to us from all the way from sunny Las Vegas. At least his hope it's sunny there. It was like 60 degrees here today. It was pretty chilly. And Derek is actually friends with one of my neighbors here in town. Hooked me up with him and said, "Hey, Derek's really smart about sports memorabilia, about cards. He loves sports in general." I said, "This sounds like somebody cool that we want to have on." So, Derek, thanks for being on with us tonight. We really appreciate you being here. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what you're into, what you like, and what got you started into sports memorabilia.
Yeah. So, like you said, I'm a big sports fan. Played sports my whole life, all the way from being a 4-year-old up through college. And I was a college teammate of your neighbor, Blake. So, got to know Blake in college pretty well through athletics. As far as the sports memorabilia and the card aspect of it, I got into it when I was about 5, and I got into the collecting part of it mostly with my dad. So my dad was one of the guys who, when he was younger in the 60s, collected cards for fun with his dad. And as he grew older, he kind of got away from it a little bit. But when after he had me, he said, I need to pick up another hobby and get back into this. So the early 90s, when I was born, my dad got me into the hobby and would take me to card shows, would take me to Target and Toys R Us after, a sports game and buy me a pack of cards. So it started with my dad. So my dad was kind of the guy that got it going for me. And then as I got older, it went from more of a collecting, which I still am a collector, but it got into more of a business side of it. So I'm still a collector first, but at the same time with the collecting, it's evolved into a side business that I'm very interested in and I'm happy to do as a side gig. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's cool. That is cool. It's amazing what our dads get us into. And the funny thing is, I don't know if you have kids. I've got 4 kids. You don't realize what you're doing to your kids when you're like, "Hey, let's go do this together." But
Yeah.
sounds like your dad kind of ignited a lifelong passion here for you that's actually turned into, a little bit of pocket, put a little bread in your pocket there for you.
Yeah.
So you've gotten into the evaluation side. Is that how that works? You're kind of helping people figure out what cards are worth, or do they
Yeah.
just send you
So
stuff and you look at it, or how does that work?
yeah, I have some friends that I grew up with that were kind of like on my teams growing up. So my dad was always one of our coaches, and obviously being around me and my dad, they kind of joined the hobby too as collectors. And as I've gotten older, some of those guys that were collecting with me as a kid kind of got out of it and found other interests, but I always stuck with it because me and my dad, like I said, like we go to shows together. Every year we go to the National Card Show, which Blake actually joined me at this year in Cleveland. But for
Cleveland?
me, it's been a hobby with my dad, and like I said, it's progressed into me kind of being like the go-to guy for my friends who are digging stuff up out of the closet or who are on Facebook Marketplace that see something. They'll send me a text or give me a call and say, "Hey, what am I looking at here?" So it's kind of evolved, like I said, from being just a collector and doing it for fun to being more of like you were saying, just more kind of evolving towards the money side of it. And some of the stuff that I've collected and I've bought, I've sat on it. That's usually what I do with the guys when I watch a lot of college sports, and I kind of do like my scouting report, if you will, when they're in college, and then when they come out into the professional ranks, their rookie cards, which are the most valuable cards in the sports industry. Those are the guys that I'm following in college that I kind of stock up on early when they're cheap, and then I'll sit on them for a long time, and then depending whether they pan out or not, that's when the value can go up or down. So it's still a hobby for me first, that being a collector, but on the side, I'm still making some change as a second gig for income.
Cool. So how how do you go about then understanding the evaluations? Like this is a whole different thing for me because I haven't I love sports. I love sport. I'm not as big into sports memorabilia as Man Cave Mike is. His Man Cave is ridiculous. But how do you go about getting into understanding the values? Like, you've got all these different brands of cards, Topps, Donruss, you name it. There's a lot of them, and there's new ones out there that I hadn't even heard of because I haven't taken a look in a while. But how do you go about getting to? Is there like a big blue book like there used to be with cards, or how do you go about getting to understand that and so that you can evaluate that yourself?
Yeah, so for like the current day and age, there's different companies that have licenses to certain sports. So right now the license is Panini for football and basketball, and Topps owns baseball, and Upper Deck actually owns hockey. I know you guys are big into hockey too. So Upper Deck's kind of the host for hockey. I'm not personally as big into the hockey card market as I am the other three. But when you're looking at cards, there's different sets that will come out by Panini, Topps, Upper Deck, Fleer, all those Leaf, different brands. The first thing you want to do for evaluating the value of cards is you want to get a card that's licensed. So you'll see sometimes people post on eBay like custom made cards or cards that are off brand, things like that. That's the first thing you want to avoid is those cards that aren't licensed because there's no value in those. As far as like the evaluation on how we look at what something's worth or what something could potentially be worth, number one, as we were speaking earlier, is the condition of the card. So we'll get into that talk too about grading and things like that. But there's a lot of cards, as you know, and as most people know, kids were riding their bikes, putting them in their bike spokes, trading, bending the corners, whatever, drawing on them, mustaches on people, things like that. The condition of the card is the most important thing when it comes to the value. So you get a license card that's in good condition. You can send in for grading. And then if it grades well, that bumps the value up significantly. So when I'm looking at cards, when I go to like the card shows in person, which I love doing because I can actually get an up close view of the card. I can take my light out and look at it, check the condition out. There's different things that I look at when I'm looking at the condition of the card. Um, there's different grading companies, which we'll get into, but a lot of the four main things that the card grading companies look at are centering of the card. So whether the picture on the card is in the center of it and the borders all line up, the edges of the card. So making sure like there's not any fraying or things like that on the actual edge of the card, the surface of the card. So the top and obviously the back of the card, no scratches, no dings, things like that. And probably the most important thing is the corners. So if the corners are dull and worn, the card's not going to grade well, and that's going to drop the value significantly. So when I do get pictures from people, it's hard over the phone if I don't have it in front of me to really give them a good estimate of what something might be worth. But if I have the card in front of me and I can actually look at it, take a light out, get underneath a light and magnify it, I can get a better idea of what the condition of it will be. And that will help with the grading part of it. So the big thing is getting a license card first. And then once you have a license card or find a license card, the condition of it. Those are the two big things that kind of bring that value up or down on them.
So that brought back a memory when I was a kid. You used to be able to get these baseball cards that would come in loaves of bread.
Yeah.
They're circular.
Yeah.
And so in Minnesota, we got twins. So you get like master bread and they were in the shape of a circle. And my mom used to give this to me all these time. Now I'm assuming something like that is probably not licensed and probably not worth, I mean, it was probably more of a novelty thing. But when you're talking about the licensing, I'm like, man, it's one of those things that's either worth a ton or garbage. That's the only way I can think of. It. But I remember getting those from my mom. She'd bring the bread home she'd go to the bread store and stuff, and then I had these little round
Yeah.
baseball cards with like Kirby Puckett or Herbank or and all these other guys from the Twins. Gagne and all these other things. So let's just maybe think about like those are probably examples of things that are not licensed.
Yeah. Some of those things I can't speak on the loaf for bread cards, but I know some of those cards that came out in the past, they're another thing that kind of goes into the value of the card is the rarity of it. So for example, if everybody in Minnesota at that time was just taking their loaf of bread and throwing the cards out and the supply and demand curve of it, if everyone threw out the cards and you kept yours and there's only a couple hundred of them in existence, that can bring the value up too. So back in that time period, there wasn't what they do now for cards is they serial number them. So the licensed companies on the back of the card, they'll actually stamp a serial number that will say like, this card is number 2 out of 99. So that you know that there's only 99 of them ever made. So what that does is that says like people that are trying to get that card, they know there's only 99 of them, so they're going to pay a premium for them. Whereas late 80s, when they were making, the boom went up on the cards and they started creating millions and millions of sets of these cards, they were overproduced. So what happens then is the supply of the card is through the roof, which brings the demand down. So it's kind of changed over the last 20, 25 years as far as the serial numbering and things like that. But to speak on the cards that you were speaking about, I couldn't tell you what the population report is or how many of those exist. But cards like that, those kind of nuance, like insert rare cards that not a lot of people might own, those can have value.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll have to see if number one, I don't know if there, I know I had some that was still in my one box from when I was a kid. I don't know what condition they're in anymore or anything like that, but you're talking about the licensing again. I'm like, man, I don't even know. Like, my mom would bring home the bread, from the bread store and they'd be like, oh, here's a baseball card. I'm like, oh, it's Kirby Puckett, and
Yeah.
be all excited about it. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, it's so cool. So you were talking about, the different kind of books out there, right? The grading and the valuation and there's different companies that you can send cards off to, right? Because in some cases to drive up the value, I know you're going to want to get it graded and have an official grade, and somebody more knowledgeable than me being able to tell you that yes, this is actually an authentic card, it's licensed, and it's worth X amount of dollars. So how
Mhm.
does that work? Like, who are these companies, and is it something that I could just send something to and they grade it and then they send me a bill, or how does that even work?
Yeah, so there's several different grading companies. The two major ones that I've been using for the last 20 years are PSA, which is a kind of like the main company that a lot of people grade with, and BGS, also known as Beckett Grading. So Beckett was the company that came out with like the magazines when we were younger, with like the price guide and all the values of the
Sure,
cards.
sure.
They have a pretty big grading company as well. There's other companies like SGC, a couple others have come out recently that have taken off, especially since COVID, because when the COVID boom happened, everybody was sending their cards in for grading. All the other companies got backed up, so these other people took advantage of the opportunity to create their own grading company. So I have not personally sent cards in for grading other than PSA and Beckett. Those are the two. I'm gold members with both of them. I've been doing it for a long time with them. I trust them. Good companies. Sometimes when I send them in, I get grades that I might not think are appropriate. So I'll crack the card out and resend it in and maybe get a different grade than the first time. So that's another thing that goes with grading is if you get a grade of a card that you don't think's right, you always have an opportunity to crack it back out and resubmit it. It's not like these cards are in like titanium, bulletproof glass. They're in plastic cases. So but yeah, I send my cards in usually to PSA and Beckett. And what I've done is in the past, PSA usually grades thicker cards a lot tougher than Beckett does. So when the cards are made, a lot of times nowadays, the higher value cards are usually thicker than like the thin base cards that just come in the regular packs. So if I get a card that I think has a little bit of edge wear, maybe because the side is really thick, and obviously with that much space, there could be a little bit of damage on the edge. I'll prefer to send it to Beckett because Beckett grades a little bit easier on those thick cards. Whereas the thin cards that don't have a ton of surface to be damaged on those edges, I'll send them to PSA if they look good. In general, PSA is usually tougher with their grades. They have a scale from 1 up to 10, 10 being perfect gem mint, which are pretty tough to get, down to 1, which is poor. They also have authentic grades. So if you want to grade a card that's maybe in bad condition or you don't think it's in a good grade and you just want to have it in an authentic slab, you can also send it into Beck and PSA and just have the authentic where they don't actually grade it numerically. So basically, I can give you an example like Beckett. I told you earlier that they grade centering, edges, corners, and surface on a scale of 1 to 10. and then they add up the scores from those four subcategories, and then they come up with a final grade. So if you were to get a 10, a 9, a 9, and a 9.5 on your four grades, Beckett would probably give you right in the middle of that, it would give you a 9.5. So Beckett does half grades, PSA only does whole grades. So I like sending cards in that I think maybe probably don't have a chance to get a PSA 10. I'll send them into Beckett and hope to get a BGS 9.5. So it's not, like I said earlier, PSA doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room on the tens. It's got to be like fresh out of the pack, no flaws. And that's why PSA Gem Mint tens are the highest value in the market, because everybody, again, supply and demand. Everybody knows there's not a lot of tens out there. Got to pay a premium for the PSA 10. So those are the two card companies that I use for grading. There's a lot of other options. There's cheaper options. Beckett usually charges about $22 to grade a card. And PSA, if you're not a member, charges, I believe, 24. So again, what my kind of general rule is, I don't send any card in that I think will sell for less than $50 in a 10 grade, because that doesn't give you a lot of margin for return of investment. So if I buy a card to show for $5 and I say, oh, this could get a PSA 10, I look up the sell values of it. And if I see, oh, it's selling for $85 in a 10, then I'll take the bite for the $24, send a PSA, hope for a 10. Then I have 45, $55 of wiggle room to make profit on it. So there's a lot that kind of goes into, like I said, inspecting the card, knowing what grades well, things like that. But if you have a good eye for it, you can see the card up close, think it gets a 10, get it in a 10. You're going to make a profit if you can flip a card that's ungraded and get a PSA 10. So PSA 10's market value is usually about 3 to 4 times what a card that's ungraded is. So if you have a card that's a $200 card that's ungraded and you send it to PSA and it comes back at 10, probably talking between $700 and $1,000 for that card.
Crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. Just from that event, the same card, but just getting that
Yep.
evaluation that just, but I suppose it makes everybody else feel good to know that, yeah, this is a real thing and um, it's not somebody just trying to blow smoke at you.
Yep.
So you talked about this from a business standpoint, right? And anytime you're making investments, you get there's a lot of research and familiarity that you got to garner to be able to do it, right? Whether it's cars, real estate, stocks and bonds, there's all, antiques, there's all sorts of things. So is this just something that you just accumulated over time, just because, like you said, you started when you were a kid, you just kind of built up the knowledge over time from going and doing these things? Or is there something that you do to, like, before you and Blake went to Cleveland, right? Is there stuff that you studied, be like, hey, and then you kind of set goals like, hey, I'm looking for these particular cards, or how do you get ready to get into that stuff? Like how does, from trying to make this into, a little more profitable, how do you get yourself educated to do that?
Yeah, so the investments are part of it. Like I said, I kind of transitioned into that when I took a little bit of time off from the card collecting. I was still, going to shows with my dad, but it wasn't a big, forefront of the things I'm doing when I was in high school. But when I got back into college, I started kind of looking at more of a money opportunity. And like I said earlier, I watch a lot of college sports. That's kind of where I watch professional sports a lot, but I watch a lot of college sports, and that's kind of like my scouting report, if you will. Watching these guys come up through the college ranks and watching them play and kind of getting a feel of what their game's like and how it's going to translate to the next level. So I do a lot of my like scouting on those investments for guys in college. And like I told you earlier, when they come out in their rookie year, the cards usually, like, there's exceptions to this, like LeBron James, everybody in the world watching LeBron on ESPN, like everybody knows who he is. But a lot of the guys that I invest in are more, I don't want to say under the radar, but kind of like the guys that you might not be like, oh, this guy is going to be a generational 10-time first team all pro type of guy. So
Sure.
I look for those opportunities for the investment, and kind of like I said earlier, like stock market, supply demand, buy low when they're rookies. Not a lot of people know about them. Sell high. So my biggest investment, I don't know if Blake shared with you, is when I was got back more into it after high school, back into college. Stephen Curry was playing at Davidson College. And my senior year of high school, I actually like I was watching Davidson go through the ranks. That was Steph's sophomore year. And I took Davidson in my March Madness bracket to go to the Final Four that year as a 10 seed. And I remember handing my bracket in. The guy who was running the bracket is like, what are you doing, man? Like they're a 10 seed. They're gonna lose in the first round. I was like, just wait and watch. So that year they came one shot away from making the Final Four. And then Steph kind of took off a little bit, but in 2009, when Steph became a rookie, everybody was all about Blake Griffin because he was the guy dunking on
Yeah.
people on Sports
Yeah.
Center, the highlight reel guy. So I was just like, this is music to my ears. I hope people are doing it. So when Steph became a rookie, I invested all of my like free capital income in a Stephen Curry rookie cards, and I was buying. It's basically like buying Bitcoin when it was a penny back then. But like I was a fan of him when he was in college. I watched him through the college ranks. I knew what his game was like. I knew it would translate to the NBA because it was starting to become a more guard dominant league at that time. And then the rest is history with Steph. But like it's more of like a projection that I do when I'm investing in guys. I watch their game, I see how it's going to translate to the next level. And then I invest in when early on in their career before they have the accolades at the professional level, buy low, and then obviously down the road when things go up, that's when you have the opportunity to sell. So it's basically like
So
my own little like scouting report that I do. Scout little I do baseball a little bit tougher for baseball because there's so many levels of the minor leagues. So
yeah,
guys will
there's
get
a lot of
drafted, and
kids
they'll
too.
come out and they'll have to go through six levels of professional baseball to get to the major leagues. Whereas basketball and football is a little bit easier. They get drafted, you're at the show. So it's more of a quick return in those sports. But yeah, baseball, basketball, and football, those are the main three that I pay attention to the guys at the college rank and kind of get a feel of their game and how it's going to translate over to the next level.
That's cool. So, example would be well, like a guy like Stefan Diggs, right? Fifth rounder out of Maryland. You know, he not necessarily on everybody's radar. He was a good receiver. I think a lot of people felt he could be a decent two or three,
Mhm.
because he had some good hands, maybe special teamer. So if you get that guy's rookies now he's not necessarily like Jefferson or Jamar Chase all world, but he's a real, Minneapolis Miracle and all that,
Yeah.
he's done a good job. But when you're evaluating, like, is there a certain round of the draft that you will not go lower than? I mean, like some guys, I mean, it's rarer the lower you get, but we're finding more and more guys that are coming up that are undrafted free agents that then
Yeah.
get in the league and like you said, they're not generational, but these are guys that are going to have, 10, 12 year careers.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like going off that point that you just made, like perfect example of that is Brock Purdy in 2022. He was
Mr.
Yeah,
Irrelevant, yeah.
Mr. Irrelevant in the draft. I personally didn't invest in Brock Purdy because I went to Northern Iowa and we don't like Iowa State. But that's a great opportunity for like somebody who's from Ames or like a big Iowa State fan. Like, oh, I'm just gonna buy Brock Purdy cards because I'm an Iowa State fan. They're buying them for $1, $2 on eBay, and then fast forward 2 years, those same cards are selling for 3, 4, $500. So it's kind of like, yeah, you can hit the gyms. The guy like Tom Brady, another example, 6th round pick, 199th overall. I like back in 2000, his rookie autograph cards are selling for $2 on Yahoo auctions. I still remember like being on those websites, and like now they're 5-figure cards. So like, yeah, you look at there are kind of some hidden gems. Stephon Diggs is another example, 5th rounder. But usually what I like to tell people that are kind of getting involved in the card scene is first collect what you like, collect who you like, whether it's a team, a player. That's the first thing you should do if you're a collector. If you're trying to do it more from an investment standpoint, what I like to tell people is if you're going to buy a card of a guy, you got to look at the guy and you're going to say, does he have a chance someday to be the face of a franchise? That's the thing I look at. So quarterbacks in football are usually the route to go from an investment standpoint because 99% of the time those guys are going to be the face of the franchise. Basketball is a little bit different. You'll have guys like Victor Wembanyama, obviously generation like everybody's going to be buying Victor Wembanyama cards. But guys that are later in the rounds that might be like a budding star or somebody who could be a face of a franchise from another team who maybe are like the 12th pick or the 20th pick, but you see potential in them, those are good guys to invest in because, again, like I said, when they're rookies, everybody's putting their money into Victor Wembanyama, and those other guys could be slipping through the cracks a little bit. But if you fast forward 5, 10 years down the road, they could potentially be a perennial all-star, a face of a franchise. So again, a lot of it has to do with just scouting and like knowing the player and how their game's going to translate to the next level. There's unpredictable players like Brock Purdy who fell into a really good situation in San Francisco of things that you can't really predict. I think he was four string on the depth chart when he got drafted, and then he's starting in the NFC Championship game that year. So there's a lot of unpredictability in that stuff, but that's what I've my kind of my word of advice to people that are getting into investment part is just look at the guy that you're buying the card of and ask yourself, does he have a chance potentially one day, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but down the road, could he be the face of the franchise? Because that's when the value of the card is going to take off.
So for us Timberwolves fans, we should be going out buying Rob Dillingham rookie cards right now because he could blow up, and be right alongside Ant as part of it, or the Nebraska quarterback Raiola, the guy who kind of looks like
Mahomes, mini me. Yeah.
yeah, he's like if you ordered Mahomes off Wish, this would be the guy you
Yeah.
got, right? You
Yeah.
get that. So I mean, but you look at some of these guys, last year with Bo Nix and that last crop of quarterbacks. So if you're looking at people, running backs, wide receivers, um, obviously edge rushers, I would assume as well, because that's where the league is at right now, right? You've got
Mhm.
quarterbacks, obviously wide receivers, running backs, and edge rushers. Those are kind of the big dollar targets. I don't know that you're gonna get maybe a lot for Joe Thomas as you would compared to Joe Montana, because even though they're the best at their craft, Montana's the one who's getting the highlights on ESPN, and Joe Thomas is like, "Well, you're good job, buddy."
Yeah.
He's getting the big high five. That's what he's getting.
So yeah, like you were saying, like Joe Thomas, Hall of Fame tackle, great player, cornerstone of that franchise for however long he was there, 10, 15 years. But again, like you said, he's not the guy on Sports Center making the highlight plays. He's not going to be looked at as the Cleveland Browns franchise player, even though he's probably the best player on the team from a skill standpoint and his position and his craft. He's not the one that's looked at like when you think Cleveland Browns and you see the highlights on Sports Center, it's not going to be highlights of Joe Thomas blocking somebody off the edge. It's going to be whoever the quarterback is, or whether it's star receiver is making the touchdown. So that's a lot of the card market is based off of that kind of stuff. Is who's the guy that everybody sees that's affiliated with that team.
Gotcha. So, why did they do the card show in Cleveland? What was it about Cleveland? I mean, of all the places that you would do, like New York, Vegas, LA, Miami, you got all these big hitters, right? Why Cleveland? Was there something about Cleveland? I can even see if they went to like Canton, Ohio, or something like Cooperstown,
Yeah.
right? Because of the Hall of Fames there.
Yeah.
But why Cleveland? Did they give a reason why that makes sense?
I don't know. I can't speak. I think the National Card Show has contracts with different expo centers throughout the country. They used to do it when I was a kid. They used to have it in Chicago, and Anaheim was another big city that they did it in. Cleveland just got added to the rotation. I think the first one there I went to was like 2010, maybe. But they alternate cities. They go Chicago, Cleveland is another one they rotate to, and then 2 years ago is in Atlantic City. So that's kind of, Atlantic City. It's kind of like a mini Vegas, but the show in Atlantic City, I don't think they're going to be going back there again. The transportation's terrible. There's a private airport there that nobody can fly into. So they try to pick cities where they have obviously the expo center in Cleveland where there's a big enough space for it because the last since COVID has gone up hundreds of thousands of people every year because the attendance of it since COVID has skyrocketed. So, and even this year in Cleveland, there wasn't enough room there for everybody. They opened the whole expo center up and there wasn't enough room. So I believe the next 2 years are in Chicago, and then I think they reset the circuit. So I don't know if they're going to be adding another city to it. I think Vegas, I'm biased, but I think Vegas would be a really good city for it. Not only for the sports collectors who come out here, but for the economy here in Vegas, because the people here obviously need hotels to stay in, and when the show is closed, where are they going to be at? They're going to be going to casinos. So I would really like to see Vegas make a bid for the next time they come around for cities, but I believe the next two are in Chicago. So they kind of have a rotation of cities they go to that they're under contract with.
Gotcha. So is this just like in my head, and this is probably revealing my Midwestern roots. I'm thinking like the ice show in Minneapolis, where you've got booze and people that are presenting or selling or whatever. And then you've got like this big winding snake of people working their way through tables. Is that how it is? Or is it they're different presentations? How does it work at one of these card shows?
Yeah, so the National Card Show, what they do is they basically just blow up the whole floor of the expo. They have tables spread out everywhere. They have different, like Panini, the company I was talking about earlier, has a big area, big corner. Golden Auctions is there. You've probably seen the Netflix
Oh,
documentary on
yeah, with
Golden.
Peyton Manning, yeah.
Yeah, they got a booth every year at it, and then there's Tops, there's Upper Deck, there's a bunch of different big kind of brand companies that are there. And then throughout the show, they have tables of individual dealers. So, like, if I wanted to go sign up to have a table at the show at the National in Chicago, I could contact them, put down a down payment for them, and then I get my own little space at the National. And then what they have in the back is they have two different areas in the back room. They have like breaking, which is kind of a different topic, but they have box breakers. So what people do, different dealers will do, they'll buy boxes in cases of cards and they'll do live streams and they'll have people that will buy into the breaks and they'll open the cards up on live stream and then they'll ship them out to you. So they have a whole breaking pavilion at the National. And then kind of the other corner of that other room is an autograph pavilion. So they'll have athletes come in and different actors and actresses that will be signing. So it's kind of like you're getting like the business side of it with Panini, Golden, all the different auction houses. You're getting people like us who want to set up a table and do deals with people. You got the breakers who are doing business, and also obviously people come to watch that live because it's exciting. And then you
Sure.
got the autograph for the, so it's kind of like a big one for all in this big exposition center. So it's a lot of fun. It takes a long time to get through the whole thing. It's not a single file line. People just kind of pile in and run everywhere. And like I said, this year there was barely even room to walk in the aisle. So they need to do something about making the facilities they use a little bit bigger and appropriate for how many people are coming to them.
This just the breaking thing. Now, I've seen some of that before, and that's kind of a whole separate thing in itself, right? Because, like you said, there's entertainment value outside of actually being in the card world. Like you can just be watching it and just like, oh my God, and they're like, hey, we're really hoping to get X card, and
Yeah.
you got the built-in drama of when they open the pack and how you're going to see it and stuff. That's cool. We should probably do something like maybe I'll do that. I've got all these bins of cards in the basement here, and we'll do that. We'll do a breaking of hockey cards from like 1989 or something. I
Yeah.
don't know. We could do something like that in the future maybe and see and
Looking
see if
for,
I have no idea what's even down there. I do
yeah.
have one thing though that we probably have to do on another episode. I have in the plastic box the complete set of the 1992 Dream Team, the coaches and
Okay.
everybody in it. And it's just been sitting in the plastic box. It's got the full thing in there. I bought it when I was a kid, and I have no idea what and then I've got a weird Michael Jordan card that I'd have to look who it is, but he's playing in, I think it was the Pan Am games or the Copa games, but he's got the full goatee while he's
Okay.
playing. It's weird. I'm like, that's why I got that card years ago. I'm like, oh my God, Michael Jordan with a goatee. I
Yeah.
forgot. I don't even know if they televised those games, some of those games, this is
Yeah.
like, before this is like the warm-ups to the Olympics and stuff. So yeah, I've got some weird stuff that we'll have to take a look at in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, Yeah, no, Derek, this is cool. This is so interesting because this is, like I said, my buddy Mike's house, and we'll do it. We'll have to get you back on so that, and while we're down there, and you can kind of see his walls are lined with wall-to-wall signed jerseys and memorabilia and stuff like that. Um, his dad is really big into cards. He said he's got a Tom Brady that's five figures or something like that. Maybe we
Yeah.
can give him a pull it out and show you. That'd be cool. But Derek. Before we sign off here, is there anything in particular that you would say for, young budding people or even older people like me that are just kind of learning about how this card things and go? What's the number one thing we should do as we start getting into this?
Yeah, I would say the first thing that I would tell people getting into is just buy, like I said earlier, buy who and what you like. If you go out trying to chase the money and looking for investment pieces that don't work out, you're going to be down about it. But if you go out and buy, if you're a big Timberwolves fan, you buy a rookie or a Timberwolves player that comes out, yeah, you might lose some money, but at least, hey, I can root for them every day. I'm watching the Timberwolves. So I would just say from a collector standpoint of it, I would just go for guys and for teams that you like to watch and are fans of. That would be my biggest thing.
Cool. Thanks. Well, Derek, I really appreciate you taking time out this evening to chat with us and join us on Man Cave Sports. Hope to have you back on in the future. There's a ton more stuff we'd like to talk to you about. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg when it gets into the card world and the sports memorabilia world. And then, we didn't even talk about any of you got the Warriors hats on. And you're talking
Yeah.
about Steph Curry, but we haven't even talked about some of your favorite teams and things like that. And so we definitely got to get you back on and have more discussions on this. So everybody out in the man cave world, this is Derek from Vegas. We're going to have more discussions with him. We'll put out some of his information. So if you guys want to have questions, you want to talk to him, maybe shoot him something, go right ahead and do that. But for another evening, thanks a lot for joining us, Man Cave Sports. Have a great night.